And we're just about ready to start the broadcast. Just a moment. Thanks for the patience as we get started and kick this off. All right, cool. It's working. So thanks for your patience today. We're gonna hop through Blumira product demo. And I'm just tweeting and LinkedIn this out. Starting the Blumira weekly product demo now. And I'll hit post. Cool. Hey, thanks for everybody that's on. Thanks for your patience. I am just gonna hit the record button and we will get started. So we are on. Thanks. Today we're gonna be hopping into Blumira and discussing automated threat detection. I'll talk through a little bit as far as where we fit well for customers that are using our service. And then how our service works, and hop into the details in a product demo. We have 30 minutes. What's great here is have the freedom if anybody has any questions or specific things they're interested in diving in, and we can do that during the demo today. And so a few things. First off, on the Blumira side is our focus is that there's significant challenges with doing effective security operations for most organizations, right? And those challenges are really in the areas of a few different things. Organizations have limited teams and capacity as it relates to security. So they might have no security person. They might have a few people or a small dedicated team. And so there's limited resources. The existing security tools that they're leveraging and using typically kick off a ton of alerts and a lot of noise. And then in order to centralize and do threat intelligence via things like logging and alerting, you have to put a SIM in place. And unfortunately, it's a choose your own adventure manual process that takes a lot of resources and time, and typically results in failure about 75% of the time, right? So the challenge, right, specifically as it relates to complex security tools, is the fact that when we're talking about doing threat detection centralized with what I would consider to be a SIM or logging solution, you essentially have to yourself do ingestion, parsing, threat intelligence, detection rules, alerting, and on and on. And what this means is you buy a SIM, you buy a SOAR to automate some of the processes of the SIM, and you end up having to have a team of people in order to even deploy and manage it. And it typically takes months, if not years, to get a successful SIM deployment. And then there's a huge operational cost ongoing. And so essentially where Blumira fits in is driving down the complexity, noise, resource requirements, and costs as it relates to money and time to value and time to security. Which results in a high customer satisfaction. So literally we're a solution you can deploy in a matter of hours and get operational and get value out of, which I will demonstrate and show you with the product today. So let's hop in and talk about how it works. One thing I would say here as well is a lot of people take existing SIMs and they build essentially like a managed service offering on them. And essentially most of the time what we see is it's hard to get that right even, and it ends up a little bit of pointing fingers back and forth because there's no central like joint management working together from a solution perspective. So I'll talk about how that changes as you look at how Blumira operates, and also how we can even enable managed service providers. So how Blumira works, right, is we're essentially focused on enabling IT and security teams. And in order to do that, solution has to be able to be deployed in a matter of hours, right? Small teams do not have the resources to be able to spend, days, months, even years in a lot of cases on implementation. Has to be able to help eliminate noise and prioritize real security risk and threats. And then it has to enable people to take action either through automated response or guided response playbooks, which we'll talk through. And how we do this, essentially automating on the front end of the security operations side as it relates to ingestion, parsing, correlating the threat intelligence, defining the detection rules, having alerting and prioritization built in. And then we also, with our sensor technology, have the capability to spin up honeypots to do lateral movement detection. And on the detection and response side, essentially, if you look at it, what we're doing is building in that like SOAR capability that typically is layered on a SIM by default, and automating a lot of the security operations workflows so you don't have to build them. And essentially what this does is it puts it in a position where enabling IT with response playbooks without requiring expertise. It actually helps them stay educated as well, which I'll show in the demo. We also meet the requirements for things like Cloud SIM. So ability to automate and generate reports, do audit, and have hundreds of built-in integrations for our customers that can be deployed in hours. And that typically is very important as it relates to compliance. Things like CMMC, NIST framework, as well as PCI and HIPAA. And a bunch of other ones as well. And then from a product and security expertise perspective, we do help our customers from a hands-on deployment perspective, consult on identified threats, and have in-product interaction and access to the security analysts, our team, on anything that might be needed from a product perspective. What this means is essentially on the front end, we're integrating with your tool stack, right? Different security tools and different IT tools, and essentially ingesting and parsing logs and applying threat intelligence detection, alerting, prioritization, reporting. We surface real threats to the customer, and then the question more or less is, can it be automated? If it can, take action. If it can't, then provide a playbook and workflow on what to do from a response perspective. We integrate, and I'll show you a little bit on the deployment process during the demo. We integrate across customers' technology stack. So firewall, your common firewalls, Palo Alto, Cisco, Meraki, Sophos, Fortinet, your endpoint stack. So Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, Sophos, Defender ATP, Silence, on and on, right? And there's more than that as well. And then on the identity side, things like Azure Active Directory. We also integrate with the Azure Cloud in their products, and also other identity products like Duo and Okta. On the productivity side, tying into places like Office 365 G Suite, Umbrella, a common good security tool as it relates to phishing email threats. And then we integrate on the host side with Windows, Linux, and really anything within the customer's environment that's going to allow us to surface risk. We do help meet compliance requirements, as I mentioned before, and our service is actually PCI certified, which is great, right? It's certified at a level in which it could store credit card data. Not that we do or we want to, but we do meet the compliance and guidelines. How our service actually works, right, is essentially your security tools and your existing IT tools are going to send logs or connect it to send alerts via our Blumira sensor, which installs on Ubuntu. That then forwards to our service over port 443 to the Blumira cloud, and which is hosted SaaS service in GCP. We then do correlation detection of threat, correlation of threat intelligence and threat hunting, and surface the alerts either to take action via the security tool or from a response perspective, help a responder take action. And what the deployment looks like is essentially immediate account activation, ingesting logs within a matter of hours. Typically, the most extensive amount of time in setup is setting the sensor up itself, which can take 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the person. Once we have ingestion, we essentially apply and deploy the detections. At that point, we're then operational and we're detecting real threats and surfacing them to our customers. And then we pretty much connect with our customers, review, and optimize ongoing. So very, very quick time to value in a space where 75% of the time people don't even get deployed. So let's take a look at the actual product. And I'm going to hop in here and talk through from a deployment perspective as well as a threat perspective what this looks like. So first off, I'm going to hop in. This is a sensor, right? The sensor is configured. We can see we're collecting all different types of logs. A lot of Windows and firewall logs in this instance. And then essentially I can add additional modules and I can add and remove a module at any time. So what I'd want to do here is first off, scroll down and I want to add CrowdStrike. Cool, put in your CrowdStrike API information, and now I'm ingesting that. And we have customers that literally say, hey, look, I love this integration with CrowdStrike because you guys surface the things that really matter. And a lot of the noise, right, that might be generated from CrowdStrike, like I don't have to look at as frequently. Maybe I do a review every once in a while. Cisco Umbrella, type in your API keys. Duo, type in your API keys. Like really, really simple. And then we also have the capability to spin up a honeypot sensor, right, on a sensor itself. And I hit install, and it installs, and it's now up and running. I can I can also do the sensor send syslog, so firewalls, Windows traffic, Linux logging. I can send that all essentially to the sensor directly as well. So once that's up and running, I'm ingesting, right? And what we're going to see is I have, if I go to my dashboard, log events coming in, it shows kind of a list of blocked, right? So blocked would be example of like your firewall does blocking and other things, and then findings that we surface to take action on, and then threats and suspected threats. And we can look down a little bit. We can look at some different types of threats from a data perspective over time. Another big common one is user account lockouts. For instance, I might take a look at or failed login users, like, hey, high aspect of admin. I might want to dive into that. But what's more important is not diving into the details. This product is designed to literally detect and surface real threats. And so I'm going to show some different examples of workflows. So in this instance, I'm going to show, these are very similar: domain administrator within Windows and G Suite administrator. So that's essentially got access to those environments, has been configured. And commonly, this is in a later stage attack when people start spinning up administrative accounts, right, to start taking action. And what I can do here is essentially assign myself from a response perspective and be able to walk through and take action here. So I could validate, hey, this is in fact a suspected threat. And when I do that, I'm going to close the finding out. And what this is going to do is I selected confirmed, right? It's going to close out the ticket. Hey, it was meant to be. Now, if I go back, for instance, to the domain administrator in this instance, what I'm going to do is essentially read this, right, and see, hey, the source user was unaware that this was created. And I'm going to close out the suspected finding. And in this instance, it closes out the suspected threat, and it's going to actually trigger a notification via voice, text, or email to myself, right? And then I'm going to go and access that. And we'll see here now this escalated to what's called a rogue domain account administrator account. And so what this means is, hey, I need to take action and fix this. We provide the PowerShell script that needs to be run to disable the account. And then I can mark that it's completed and close the finding as valid. Now, I can also write a message here. Maybe I'm uncertain and I need some more clarity, and I can communicate with a security analyst, right? Hey, maybe this isn't clear. I need more information, whatever you want. And we're essentially going to interact and respond in ticket and have the pertinent information to be able to help the person on the other side. Now I'm gonna close this, right? We've confirmed that it's not needed, and I'm gonna go through and show some additional types of threats that are pertinent and interesting to most customers, right? So I'd say the got access admin is a later stage, typically an attack where they're spinning that up. And then a lot of times subsequently after that, ransomware gets deployed, is what we've commonly seen. Now there's other things, right? So detecting via your AV logs, things like Mimikatz is a good example of being able to surface and take action. Now, as I scroll a little bit further down, I'm going to show some other examples as well. So in this instance, we've detected someone reported or denied access via Duo. And what this would mean is like, there's a high likelihood that the primary authentication, primary credential is compromised. So we'd want to reestablish trust of that primary credential. So in this instance, we're recommending a reset of the password. So when the user logs in, they reset that and reestablish that trust. And then we can mark that it was completed and close the finding as valid, right? We can see also the information down below as far as how we match the evidence. And then I'll show another example in just a moment here as I scroll down of automated actions that I can click through. So a good example is Cisco AnyConnect, right? In this instance, we're detecting that there's anomalous attempts of access. So this is a very early stage of attack. Someone's doing password spraying. And essentially what we have identified is here's the IP addresses that are performing the attack. Now, very early stage, there really hasn't been a compromise, but we want to take care of this. The best way to do that is to block the source IP addresses of the attack. And when I do that, I'm going to resolve the finding. And essentially what that did is it put a rule on my firewall block list. And we can view the block list here so you can see the IP addresses that it put in. And I can actually take a step further via ASA, Firewall, Palo Alto, NGFW, and FortiGate, where they support dynamic block lists. I can also apply Blumira's threat feed. And then in addition to that, I can automate the response so that actually it requires no human interaction from a response perspective. And I can also use community intelligence across all the Blumira customers if I wanted to. So pretty simple and intuitive as far as a good way to automate from a response perspective. The last thing I'm going to hop into is a little bit from a risk perspective, right? So I'll hop down here and we're going to show some different examples. So first off, outbound connection is identified, high amount of data being exfiltrated, right? We want to look into this because it could be someone trying to actually exfiltrate and take data from the company. So good indicator of like, hey, something's not right here. Some other good examples are time and time again, right? We see risks identified where like all of a sudden a public IP address is connecting via protocols that shouldn't be accessible via the public IPs. And this is a good example where remote desktop protocol and RDP essentially are available in this instance, right? And I can see, you know, the recommendation is that they should be behind a VPN and protected with two-factor authentication. And then more or less either get those controls in place or you're accepting risk and high likelihood of a ransomware attack with all the exploits available out there to get access to an RDP server. Is common. We also see other things like protocols like SMB are other example instances. So pretty intuitive. And then the last workflow I'm going to talk through, and this is pretty similar to the domain account administration. When we're talking about audit and compliance, this is particularly important because there's this aspect of operational auditing that's required by the compliance frameworks. And the truth is most people are not actually doing what's required from an audit perspective. Usually in their SIM products, they schedule an email that gets sent to their inbox and someone's supposed to review that on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, right? Account creation. The reality is it normally just ends up in the inbox and nobody actually does it. In this case, we open a ticket and it has to be completed. So we're actually acknowledging and showing here as I close the finding out, I validated this actually was supposed to take place. And now I have a full audit trail and track record of that account creation being validated and that it was supposed to happen. So this type of stuff from an audit and compliance perspective is particularly important and part of the design intention of the Blumira products, right? So most of, and feel free if you have any questions for those on, I just want to make sure we have some time for Q&A and whatnot. But yeah, the reality is like most people's impressions at this point are, wait, but like SIM most of the time is all about reporting and logging. And the reality is like, yeah, that stuff's really important. The approach we're taking here is yes, we do all that and you have access to it, but we're really focusing focusing organizations and making sure that they get the threat detection and response right, because that's the most important piece, is identifying the risks and then remediating those risks when they do happen, right? So pretty simple, intuitive. And then the next thing I'm going to hop in and show in a moment is specifically a little bit around being able to do reporting. And reporting can be done for several different means. Most common, and I kind of laugh, is typically on an audit and compliance side for smaller and mid-sized organizations. And so give me just a moment here, because I'm essentially logging into a separate account so I can go through a little bit more detailed analysis on the reporting side to show that. But that's what's from my perspective, that's what's really interesting is like the traditional SIM has been only focused on reporting and hasn't really got to the threat detection side effectively very, very well, or fast or quick. So that's where we get time to value, is making sure that you're actually detecting real threats. Now, I'm going to resume my screen share so you can share my screen. You see I'm logging into a different account. What I want to show here is essentially some of the reporting capabilities. So we have this search capability, and I'm going to go to data. And essentially, I can either build my own reports, right? So I can select the data set I'm interested in, or I can go to the global searches and see pre-canned reports. And in this instance, I'm going to go to Active Directory and I'm going to look up created users, right? And I'm going to edit the search dates because the data is a little bit from I think a few weeks ago or a month ago, right? So when I widen that out, I'm going to hit this search, and we're going to see here, it's going to now show up with user account creation. And I can click on here and I can essentially extrapolate out like, any specific columns. So maybe I want to see domain would be a common one. Maybe I also want to see the user account created. And so I can get this out, I can sort through it. And then I also can come in here and I can make a determination of like, maybe I want to remove the domain column, and then I want to enable something called distinct counts and turn that on. And essentially when I do that, right, what it's going to do is it's going to then put the counts up here so I can search quickly and see, hey, here's an example where I have a single count. Here's where I have more than a single account, right? I have 7, for example. So a lot of times what you're looking for is more or less like outliers in sets of data if you're looking for risk. Or I might say, hey, this specific user from a lockout perspective, and I could use an event ID to do this search, but I could essentially take the username here. So in this instance, IM-user13, and I could create a search criteria, add a filter, right? And I'm going to type in username or user, right? And in that instance, I'm going to make it equal to, and we'll type IM-user13. And I'm gonna then hit the search button. And we're gonna see here, now I have all the records essentially associated with this user. And I can look through that if I want to. So really, really easy, quick. And I could also, let's say remove the event ID. Now I could get all the logs associated with this specific user, right? So that's gonna take a moment, and I can sort through and look down, and I can sort by time frame. Where this becomes particularly interesting is not only is it valuable from like a search perspective, but a good example might be like, hey, let me look at all the users and the top number of account lockouts, or the top number of failed password attempts. Like that's a good example of a data set that becomes interesting, where you can surface real risk. So it's made to be very, very easy and intuitive from a usability perspective when we're talking about getting access to the details in the data. So that's high level. From a Blumira perspective, I do want to emphasize like the time to deployment, getting up and running quickly, effectively from account activation to fully operational, right? We see it typically in a matter of days, and we're talking a few hours worth of actual work and time. And that's a huge amount of the value as we're talking about the ability to get value quick and fast. So my recommendation is I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes back, but unless there's other questions. But yeah, my recommendation is check out the product, give it a try. Integrates across tech stack, deploys very, very quick, fast, and effectively. From a coverage perspective, right, we can cover the 95% of the use cases customers have, and even if there's a outlier, right, we work pretty closely with customers and making sure that we have adequate and appropriate coverage. The real aspect with Blumira is helping them get real threat detection and response and identifying risks and surfacing those. But then there's a lot of underlying value of all the compliance requirements that we help customers meet when doing and putting those controls in place. So thanks everybody today. Appreciate your time. I'm gonna give 5 minutes back, and feel free to hit us up if you have any questions or you'd like a personalized demo or wanna try the product out yourself. Take care.